Hello, my name is Alina Croft. Today I'll be working with Haley Byer and Courtney Coppola and explaining how to report on sexual assault. First, it is important to know the Nevada state definition of sexual assault. It reads, when a person subjects another person to sexual penetration or forces another person to make a sexual penetration on himself or herself or another. Why is this important? When reporting on a sexual assault, it is important to be using the correct terminology for your audiences. This includes what qualifies as a sexual assault and also the language that surrounds it. In this case, we will be focusing on the state of Nevada. Every state definition can vary, which will change how it is addressed. Tip: to avoid using terms such as date rape or acquaintance rape. These terms can lead to confusion that date rape is somehow less serious or different than regular rape. Statistic: in 8 out of 10 sexual assaults, the perpetrator is someone the victim knows. Instead, the crime should be named and followed with information about the perpetrator. As an example, it is appropriate to say an individual was sexually assaulted by an intimate partner.
On dartcenter.org, there are several sources that you can use to help you report on sexual assault. The first one is called Reporting on Sexual Assault. It explains that most people involved in a sexual assault situation prefer the word survivor instead of victim. It also explains how you should respect a potential interviewee's right to say no. It also gives a tip that in the majority of cases, a female victim is going to want to be interviewed by another woman. It explains how rape or assault is not sex. It also asks you to ask yourself whether approaching someone risks compromising his or her safety and privacy, because in some societies, it is suspected of being raped can lead to humiliation, being ostracized, or even to further violence. And so it asks you to tread carefully and think about how and where you meet a potential source, and it could even be helpful to ask them where they feel safe and what time of day and how many people they want to be with you. And it's also important when describing an assault to try to strike a balance when deciding how much graphic detail to include, because too much can be gratuitous while too little can weaken the survivor's case.
Rolling Stone investigation, a failure that was avoidable. Rolling Stone's reputation at the narrative of rape on campus is a journalistic failure that was avoidable. The failure encompassed failure in reporting, editing, editorial supervision, and fact-checking. In March, after a 4-month-long investigation, Charlottesville, Virginia Police Department said that it had exhausted all investigative leads and had concluded that there was no substantive basis to the support account alleged in the Rolling Stone article. It shows us that needing the name of the accuser needs a fact check. That was a pitfall. Cases like these, false accusation, weakens belief for the true survivors. And then it harms the falsely accused organizations involved. Like in this case, it was Phi Kappa Phi. Every single person at the level of this thing had opportunities to pull strings a little bit harder, but no one did. An example of good and bad reporting is in the new Netflix show, Unbelievable. This is an example of bad reporting in one girl's scenario, the one that the show is based off of, because they used her name, causing her more damage. She ended up losing her housing, her job, all of her family, all of her friends, because the media reported wrongly. There was also differences in the detective, male versus female. The male detectives were pushing her way too hard and making her fill out way too many reports about these rape allegations. And she finally gave up, and she said that she was lying the whole time and she was never sexually assaulted or raped. And then when the female detective came in years later, she finally found out that this girl was not lying. And then another pitfall in this show was they were asking too much of this girl, and she finally just gave up. She didn't want to talk to the media anymore. She didn't want to talk to anyone about this because she told everyone that she had lied to act like it had never happened. And then they made her out to be a villain versus another girl who was being a survivor, and that is when we are going to talk about the good.
So the good example in this show, a couple weeks after the first woman was raped, another woman was raped by the same man. When they were reporting on hers, it was talking about how she was a survivor and she reported correctly, and they believed her and they wanted to find it. but it was really how the media portrayed her that changed the story. So it's a lot about believing your victims and calling them survivors, not necessarily victims, in your reports. And it's also important for the detectives, like journalists, when they're interviewing them, to make sure that they are sensitive to their feelings and the events they have been through.
In summary, we learned these few things about how to properly report on sexual assault. So some potential pitfalls for reporters reporting could be using the wrong terminology, doing insufficient research, or having a lack of empathy when interviewing or reporting on the survivors.
Some examples of problematic reporting or strategic communication was the Rolling Stone article reference or the unbelievable story that was told.
Some advice and solutions for reporting on the types of people concerned could be using the correct terminology, believing the survivors, doing sufficient fact-checking, using empathy, and allowing the survivors to lead the investigation and research.
There were some examples of good reporting as well, and unbelievable with the woman that was considered a survivor.
An overview of relevant terminology was, the biggest one was survivor versus victim. They prefer to be called a survivor. And then a lot of people, when they're reporting on sexual assault, tend to use the phrase date rape or sex, and those are both incorrect. They should be referred to as a sexual assault.
And finally, an important tip to remember is should an assault victim be named, and it should always be up to the survivor, whether they feel comfortable being named in an article or not. Thank you!